So don't let my title fool you. Even though I am the VP of Ocean Mapping, I am also very concerned and interested in lake mapping as well. So the title of my talk today is Using Long Endurance, Low Impact Uncrewed Survey Vehicles. What's pictured here is our large sail drone, the Surveyor, which recently completed a round trip transit to Hawaii from San Francisco, doing ocean mapping the entire way. So an autonomous, remotely monitored system that is proving itself. Sail drone, as a company, we're located in Alameda, California, and we have. I'm going to go through today. I'll talk to you about the different types of sail drones that we have, but also what I want to focus on first, if you go to the next slide, is the challenges of the Great Lakes, and just kind of, what is the perception when you talk to people? Because there are these lovely multicolored images of the bathymetry of the Great Lakes, and everyone says, oh, then it's already mapped, right? So we'll talk about that. Or if it's not, that sure looks like a lot of work. And then how much effort have we actually put against that, from both the U.S. and the Canadian sides? And then we also know that there are some tough conditions up there. These aren't areas that can be surveyed necessarily year-round. And so how do we approach both the perceptions and fighting that, the environment itself? What is the actual scope of what needs to be done? And then how is the funding going to come? Who's going to pay for this? Next slide. So in the already mapped column, well, it's not really mapped to what we would say modern standards. So what we have here for the US side are the NOAA's bathymetry gap analysis, which I know you've seen in previous presentations. But again, I think it's worth looking at again to show just exactly how much of the Great Lakes has not had that thorough multi-beam mapping. And as most of you here know, the reason is it's pretty shallow. That takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, especially when you're trying to use traditional survey methods to do that. Next slide. So there is actually a lot of data in the Great Lakes. There is a lot of single beam data, but when you take a look at this chart kind of showing the age of data from National Ocean Service, there really is a lot of very old data in the Great Lakes. And so certainly well overdue for an update to the charting data, but also having higher resolution data to support the things that Diana talked about regarding being able to better utilize our Great Lakes and understand them, model those efforts that are going on for whether it's a biological modeling or navigation purposes, all the things that we would want to have high resolution bathymetry for. Next slide. So, there has been if you look at this Coast Survey plan since 2019, there has been a lot of work done and accomplished. And so I want to give, kudos to them for actually being able to accomplish this work, especially through COVID and being able to knock out things in 2020. And you can kind of see the areas that are projected and planned to be done in 22 and 23. But again, we're still kind of doing patchwork effort of mapping. Obviously, there's got to be prioritization that gets done. And so it becomes, again, you're resource limited. So how much can you do with the resource that you're given in the time frame that we have to map the Great Lakes? Next slide. So again, we talk about the tough conditions. If you look at some of the climate studies that are being done regarding the Great Lakes, you can see that we're seeing longer periods of no ice cover. We're getting higher water levels. We're getting stronger storms. So I think all of us kind of understand that the climate is going to increase the importance of the Great Lakes. It's also potentially going to increase major weather events leading to erosion. And how do you model that if you don't know that bathymetry throughout the Great Lakes? So, again, there's more to this than just, hey, we should go up there and map it for mapping's sake. This is really, really important. Again, the importance of the Great Lakes to the U.S. and Canada can't be overstated. Next slide. So what is our strategy to do this? I would appreciate Diane's introduction and her discussion of collaboration between the U.S. and Canada, because it truly has to be across border collaboration. Certainly we don't want to stop at the border in the middle of the lake. If we can be more efficient surveying, to be efficient and effective, this is all for the common good of the two countries. We need to do that together. I think we also, you've seen this week, a multi-asset approach is really going to be needed here. There's going to have to be more airborne LiDAR, certainly USVs like a sail drone or other powered USVs to do the work, as well as your traditional shipboard surveys. But really, I'm an advocate of, go big. We can't keep waiting and doing these patchwork surveys, and maybe by 2050 we have it. The idea here behind Lakebed 2030 is that we get this done, but on the current track that we have, we're not going to get it done. And so we've got to raise the priority, get some funding pushed through both sides of the border to support this work. And my feeling is we're not going to get there unless we use uncrewed tech. And if we can do it, let's do it now. Let's make it clean as well. There are the technologies we have now to do this, so that we're not risking additional pollution of the Great Lakes from just more and more survey boats that are out there. We can use low impact vehicles that are more cost effective, and it's safer for the surveyors as well. Next slide. So that's where we feel sail drone comes to play. Many of you have seen this slide before. This is our range of systems. What I'd like to focus on for here is the Voyager system, which you see is our medium size vessel. That's a 10-meter vehicle that has a Norbit multi-beam on board, plus a winch with sound velocity profile. The Explorer is totally solar and hydro generated power, whereas the Voyager does have a small diesel engine to provide power to charge those batteries and to run the multi-beam, which are fairly power hungry. And of course, on the right is our Surveyor, which is, in my mind, might be a little overkill for the Great Lakes with the EM304. We don't need that system. So if you go ahead to the next slide, I'll show you why we feel the Voyager is going to be a perfect fit for bathymetry in the Great Lakes. Again, you've got that high resolution shallow water multi-beam integrated with a POS-MV. We've got a sound velocity profiler where it can take its own sound velocity measurements through the water column. We have AIS receiver and a smart camera system that provides 360-degree coverage, plus onboard machine learning that alerts us to any dangers to navigation, and we'll have a radar on board as well. We can also take your standard net ocean observations. So while we're out there surveying, we can also provide weather observations to the National Weather Service and others who don't have enough observations. And I know in certain times of the year, the buoys on the lakes are pulled in, so there aren't very good observations being made in some of the shoulder months. It would be great to have the ability, when the storms are at their worst, to actually get those weather observations in hand to support modeling and forecasting. You can also see we've got some ocean measurements we're doing with a Seabird SB37, and we can also monitor wave heights using our IMU on board. So again, very capable, very durable, and long duration vehicle. These vehicles can go for up to 60 days before returning to either refuel or offload data. So 60 days, 24/7 surveying is really something we feel is what's needed on the Great Lakes. And then if you think about scaling up, USVs can be scaled up quickly, and you can put more of them on the task than you currently have funding for to put more traditional survey ships on task. So really the cost savings you get, you also get a massive more capacity to do these surveys in the Great Lakes. Next slide. So how do we operate these? So from a vehicle ops perspective, we have a pilot who's monitoring the vehicle. They have the ability to look at all the cameras, they look at radar, they look at AIS. And we have a very robust alerting system that lets the pilot know what's going on around the vehicle. Next slide. From the Surveyor Operations, there's a surveyor on watch who's monitoring the systems on board. And the client, and I'll mention this on the next slide, is tracking the mission through our mission portal. But we've got onboard data management system, much like you would see on a ship, but we've automated, or at least semi-automated, quite a bit of the effort on board so that we can do processing on board. We can offload data quickly and get it processed into the customer very, very quickly after we pull in. Certainly, we're limited by the communication bandwidth that we have, so we can't offload the data in real time, I'll say yet. Certainly, as communication paths improve and the compression and processing of data on board improves, I feel that we will eventually get to the point where we're surveying and pushing data directly into the cloud for final processing and delivery. And really looking forward to the work that's being done in that area and other parts of the industry. Next slide. So our mission portal, this is an example of a fisheries survey off the West Coast. And basically, as a customer, you would have access to your mission, and you would be able to kind of tailor your view of what sensors you want to see on board and be able to watch the drone kind of in near real time. For bathymetry missions, we would be doing an offload of coverage maps and also health and quality data for the systems on board. And so that'll all be viewed both by the customer and by the surveyor. And if there's an issue that needs resolving, then we can remote desktop into the system and take care of what needs to be fixed. But all in all, this is a very secure system. We also do all of our communication through this. So no emails flying that get lost. Everything is captured within the communications portion of the mission portal. It allows kind of that real-time interaction with the pilot and the surveyor. So if there is something that the customer sees in the data, say if we think we saw a wreck, and let's go back and take a look at that a little closer, then we can do that. And that's all done through the mission portal. Next slide. So I just want to point out, and this is a little hard to see, but there are two separate red tracks. So for the last 2 months, we've had 2 Explorer sail drones operating in Lake Michigan, Lake Huron, doing a mission for the Great Lakes Science Center and doing some fisheries surveys. And again, these were launched, spent 60 days sailing through the lakes unattended and being recovered now. So, proving that we can operate these. A lot of wind on the Great Lakes, which is good for us. The faster we move, the more we can generate hydro power from our hydro generator, so that's really good. And we're very durable, which I think some of you may have seen. I'm going to show something here in a second about that. Next slide. So just kind of my final thoughts on this. The Great Lakes are really too important for us to continue to just keep talking about how we want to do this. We really need to put forth some substantial collaborative effort between the U.S. and Canada within the U.S., the Great Lakes states, to get the priority and the funding for mapping the Great Lakes at the level that it really needs to be. And again, it's in our opinion that using systems like a sail drone that has long endurance, but also the low carbon footprint, is an ideal way to survey the Great Lakes. Now, I think, Amber, we're going to be able to show the video. All right, so for some of you may have seen this. This is an additional video. So we just yesterday drove one of our Explorer sail drones into Hurricane Sam out in the Atlantic. This was enduring. We had gusts of wind 120 miles an hour and 40-foot waves. So you can see the video that we were able to transmit back. Happy to report 1045 is happy today and is functioning as it was before the storm. But again, USVs are offering us great new opportunities to do environment. At that, I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. That was great. I guess if there's anybody questioning how robust that platform is, that's a perfect example to demonstrate its capabilities. I just had a couple questions, and again, for the audience, if you do have questions for Brian, please put them in the question bar. We'll be glad to get through them. We have a few minutes to that, so please ask away. Kind of question related to the robustness of the platform. You know, the Great Lakes obviously has winter conditions. Do you have experience, or do you have plans to run any of your sail drone equipment through the winter months?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, we've got experience working in the Arctic. We've been in the Arctic for the last 7 years, and so we have experienced some of the similar conditions you would see. Now we're not up there, certainly into the heavy weather months, but you know, icing and of the systems themselves are something that we're familiar with and understand. But we think we can still go pretty deep into the shoulder seasons to be able to operate before, you know, it just either gets too rough or there's too much surface ice for us to continue.
How about the other question, future plans for putting your platforms into the Great Lakes? Are there anything on the horizon for next year?
So we are planning to do another follow-on mission with the 2 drones that we did this year. And we've been working, trying to get some funding to put a Voyager system up there to demonstrate the shallow water mapping capability in the Great Lakes. So we are certainly looking for opportunities to do that.
I guess a follow-on to that, Brian, are you thinking still, the current mapping was done in Huron and Michigan. Is there any plan to put one in as part of that follow-on, either in Superior or Ontario or Erie?
I would have to defer to the Great Lakes Science Center folks on what their thoughts are for next year. I don't know that we've gone that far in the planning process yet.
Gotcha. So lots of questions coming in, which is great. So here's one. Any concerns for use of the USV in the Canadian waters in terms of Transport Canada approvals or requirements?
We've worked in Canadian waters before, and certainly regulations are always changing with respect to USVs. I think we've kind of proven that, you know, we can operate safely, but I would be, you know, that is certainly something we talk about with every country that we go to on what are their requirements, regulations, and then we would adjust to fit those. But, you know, again, these systems are, as you can tell, they're kind of bright orange. They're pretty easy to spot. They've got all the systems that a ship has, and in some cases probably more than some ships should have. And so we are very vigilant, and we've proven that. But again, I think there's work to do on the regulatory side to understand how these systems can be brought to bear. So, you know, we put out a notice to mariners that will be working in areas. Same thing would apply on the Canadian side. I'm not completely familiar with the operations for the Canadian side, but that's something that our operations group is very aware of.
Just another feedback from Peteresselman, basically saying that GLSC has contracted with Sail Drone to work for 25 days with 2 drones in Lake Superior next year. Plans to return to Sail Drone Lake Erie in Ontario in 2023 if budget holds up. So answer to one of the previous questions. So that's great.
Thanks, Peter.
Another question from Peter as well is, hydrographic surveys tend to benefit from straight lines with appropriate overlap between adjacent swaths. With sail drones need to tack within a movement corridor, how well can they, quote, mow the lawn mapping modality to be retained? Sorry, struggled with.
No, that's a great point. We get asked that a lot, and the thing is, our drones can sail very straight lines. They're autonomous piece that's the most robust is the navigation, and so we can stay within, you know, plus or minus a couple of meters of the line that it's given to run. But the one thing that's a little different is compared to traditional hydrographic survey line planning, you know, we will probably first look at the winds. You know, what are the typical winds for an area, and we will set up for the best possible you know, wind regime for us. Now, if we get there and that's not actually happening, well, then we change. But we've had no issues with overlap of the multi-beam systems and they're very well behaved. In fact, one of the issues we have is they turn so quickly to get onto the next line. It kind of was an issue for us, figuring out how to react that quickly to start and stop a line within a quick time frame. So, but it stays on track really well.
Thanks. Another question is, Brian, is how do you see the data processing pipeline looking for a binational agreement where should the data ultimately end up in both countries' federal reserves?
Yeah, I saw that question from Tim.
Okay.
But isn't he the data guy? Shouldn't he have that answer already for me? But
testing you.
Certainly, I think that's an agreement that needs to be considered is data sharing across the Great Lakes for this. Having it sequestered on either side doesn't do anyone any good from other uses than navigation piece. Now this is just Brian's opinion, but to me, total data sharing makes the most sense.
Gotcha. Another question came in on basically was on your sail drone video clip in the hurricane. How long did the reconfigurations take to put it into that environment?
So what we did for that drone is, you see the sail here, the wing of the Voyager. So if you kind of cut off the wing where it says Voyager, and then took the tab that's up at the top and integrated that into the wing. So we essentially reefed the main, if you're a sailor, to handle heavy weather, which is what you would normally do. And then we also did a lot more reinforcement with carbon fiber and things. So we tested these systems with NOAA in the Pacific northern winter and had good results there. And so we were pretty confident that we could handle the hurricane, although we were all very nervous as Sam was bearing down on sail drone 1045. But so that's the primary reconfiguration is we shortened the wing.
So another question, Brian. What is the appropriate size of an area that the Voyager can do in 60 days? And then also, what is the estimated cost of a survey like that?
Well, I mean, if you're a surveyor, you know that the area isn't always the best to measure because your depths really determine what your swath width is and how much you could cover. So really, it kind of depends on the specific area. But I can tell you that from a cost perspective for a Voyager, if we were going to do shallow water mapping with the multi-beam, our costs would range between $8,000 to $9,000 per day, and so that's for 24/7 operations. And so, if you take a look at that, kind of look at speed of 5 to 6 knots of survey, then I'll let folks figure out for themselves how much it would cost or how much could be done for 60 days based on the water depth you're looking at. Now, I would have loved to come here and given you a complete, here's how we could survey the entire Great Lakes with sail drones. Haven't done that yet, but that's something we're actually taking a look at is and doing that detailed planning where we account for the changes in the depth of the lakes to get a much better idea of how long it would take. But we know how long it's going to take, right? So it's with ships, basically, if you can ramp up and have more systems out there collecting, you can get it done. I tell everyone mapping is a problem you can throw money at. There are a lot of problems you can't throw money at, but this is one. If you can bring more assets to bear, you can get this done.
Thank you. And again, I'll put it out to the audience. If there are any questions for Brian, please put them in the question bar. There are 2 comments in here which I think are totally appropriate. The first, there's a note from Chris Marshall, Canadian Hydrographic Society, basically saying he'd be interested to see discussions proceed regarding cross-border collaboration, joint projects, and funding opportunities.